the Democratic Party probably shouldn't exist. And that's mainly a criticism of how weird, unique, and old it is as a political entity in the modern day. And it's really that point of old. I need to stress how old the Democratic Party is. The Democratic Party was founded in 1828, almost 200 years ago. And I believe I'm right. Please correct me in the comments if I've missed something. But as far as I can tell, the Democratic Party is the oldest political party on Earth that still exists across the entire planet and all democracies that currently exist. Like, I mean, I did see some people saying that maybe the British Conservative Party is a contender with like roots going back to like the 1670s, I think, but they didn't even properly formalize as the Conservative Party that we know today in the UK until the 1830s. So there's a tiny but like meaningful head start that the Democrats had on the British Conservatives. I'm just quickly going to jump into the origins because I really want to explain why this party is the way that it is. It has its origins in the Democratic Republican Party. Now, the Democratic Republican Party was the party of James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, James Monroe. It was the political party that the founders went into if they believed that they wanted the federal government to be small. They wanted states to be the primary operators of like political power after the Revolution. Opposing them was the party of Alexander Hamilton, John Adams, George Washington to an extent. That was the Federalist Party. And they believed in like a strong federal government and maybe like just a power structure that was more akin to what the United Kingdom had. But they kind of collapsed as a political force once George Washington was gone, in all honesty. So what the first quarter of the 1800s looked like for the United States was complete domination politically by the Democratic Republicans. And it got so extreme that the Federalists effectively went extinct. They did not exist as a political force. And that didn't raise a lot of alarm bells because there was this thought or this hope among a lot of early Americans that political parties would just be a fad. Like, as soon as like there'd be a bunch of partisan bickering, but then they would come together, there would be no political division in the United States, and the people would just rule together as like one cohesive nation. So, when one of the two major political parties, the Federalists, died effectively, a lot of people thought, oh, that's not bad for democracy or anything. That is just a sign that we are there. We are back to this state of like national unity. Partisan division is over. It was not. Once the Federalists were gone and the War of 1812 ended, there was this period called the Era of Good Feelings, somewhat ironically, where there was this extreme sense of like national unity and coming together. The Federalists didn't even run opposition, and like James Monroe was elected as a Democratic Republican with literally no opposition. Nobody ran against him. The only electoral vote that wasn't for him in the Electoral College was like one protest vote against him. So here we are in the 1820s. There's no opposition to the Democratic Republicans, most popular party in the country. There is no like opposition in any practical sense. And what happens? Factionalism. The Democratic Republican Party ran into an issue that parties tend to when they become too big and too successful. Like, there's a point of diminishing returns for political success. And that problem they ran into is that when you are so broad that you can represent everyone, you actually can't really represent anyone because you have such a broad base of support that eventually their interests are just going to start conflicting with each other. And that was most like highlighted in the election of 1824. When James Monroe was gone, there were effectively no founding fathers left that would run for president. You basically just had people just like jump in representing factions, and the Democratic Republican Party had 4 candidates all running against each other for the presidency. The largest of these factions was led by Andrew Jackson. He was an ardent populist, very much praised himself as for the working man, not for the elites as he saw them. And the Democratic Party officially formed in 1828 specifically by his like right-hand man, Martin Van Buren, to push Andrew Jackson as the man that should be president in 1828. It was effectively just his political campaign to make him president in 1828, which they did. And the Democrats in this area were insanely successful. They were basically like the default party of American politics. From 1828 up until just before the Civil War, there were 7 presidential elections. The Democrats won 5 of them. The only 2 they didn't win was when their opposition, the Whigs, great name, ran really, really popular war heroes. Both of those war heroes that won for the Whigs died in office and had extremely unpopular vice presidents take over. So, not really any success politically for anyone who wasn't the Democrats in that era. Oh, and fun fact, the reason that the Democrat symbol is a donkey is because one of the attacks by the Whigs and Jackson's opposition was that Jackson's a jackass. Jackass the donkey. But Jackson actually really liked that association because a donkey was an animal that working people and people on farms would use, and it was not a symbol of the wealthy, so he actually stuck with it, and that's why it is the party of the donkey to this day. Jackson's desire to have a party that represented working people and farmers and not elites, as he saw it, really stuck with the party, and it became the party of like the working South pretty much from like its creation all the way up until the 1960s. The 60s was when, of course, immense political change there. The Democratic Party repositioned itself as a party of civil rights and the expansion of rights for African Americans. And at that point, it just kind of completely flips its head, and the Democratic Party becomes something that we're not really used to. The Democratic Party didn't really know what it was at that point. After Johnson's win in 1964, when they weren't the party of the South, really, they were kind of lost in the woods, as it were. They tried going back to like a Southern appeal with Jimmy Carter. That worked. Then he got destroyed. And then, of course, they finally came back with Bill Clinton after losing 3 in a row to the Republicans, who himself was a Southerner. It wasn't until Barack Obama that they were actually able to find a candidate who could win a presidential election that was not from the South. Isn't that crazy to think about? It took them, after Kennedy, the Democrats did not have a president that wasn't from the South until Barack Obama in 2008. It took them 50 years to figure out a working, proper strategy that did not revolve around people from the American South. When you look at the Democratic Party today, does it really look like they've figured out what their broad strategy and appeal is, I suppose? Like, I saw a photo the other day of AOC, Joe Biden, and Joe Manchin all put together. It's like, how are these guys in the same political party? And I think it's a valid question. You have like a socially conservative union guy, a moderate, and someone who brands himself as a left-wing progressive. And it's hard to see what ties the three of them together to work in a single political party, if I'm being totally honest. I don't think the Democrats have a comparative, like, internal unity like what the Republicans have. If you're a Republican and you don't like the way the party's going at the moment, and you're a vocal critic of, like, Trump's reforms and his policies, you're probably not in the party anymore, which is the reality. Whereas, like, Democrats, I don't know what their unifying message is. In 2020, it was purely just, we are not Donald Trump and we want to run against him. That works. That worked really well. But what's the unifying message when he's gone? I think the Democratic Party, put really, really simply, is 3 different political parties in a trench coat pretending to be one. It is such a broad spectrum of people with very different ideas. You've got working class white people, college educated white people, support from black voters, support from Latino voters, support from union members, but also the highly educated who work in the technology sector. There's such a broad range of support here, and I'm finding it hard to envision what is a single unifying message that this party is going to have once their main form of opposition, Donald Trump, who seems to have united all their factions into supporting their candidate at the moment, Harris, what do they unite around when that enemy is gone?